Mama, we can start now.
Sure, sir. A very good morning to one and all. Programming is the necessity of present age. Keeping this thought in our mind and positivity in our heart, I, Dr. Wasima Khan, welcomes one and all present over here to today's talk, that is second last talk in the series of international SAGE talks. Today we are having with us Dr. Naveen Kabra, ACM India eminent speaker, co-founder and CTO at Rallyscore.com. He'll be giving today's talk on which programming language should you learn and why. Dr. Naveen Kabra did his PhD with David Devitt in computer science from University of Wisconsin in 1999 and a BTech in computer science from IIT Bombay before that. Dr. Naveen Kabra is currently a co-founder and a CTO at Rallyscore.com, a software startup, and the creator of PuneTech.com, a portal for the tech community in Pune. In the past, he worked for large companies and small, worked in India and in US, seen a successful exit and a .com failure, done product development and research, written consumer software and enterprise software, and been a developer, architect, and manager. His area of interest are highly scalable systems, distributed and fault-tolerant software systems, and text search, information retrieval, and analysis of unstructured information. He's an eminent speaker of ACM India, and his popular talks include which programming language should we learn and why, which is going to be conducted today, MS, MBA, or job, planning your career, understanding Bitcoin and the blockchain, overview of machine learning, the difference between student programmers and professional programmers. Now, I invite Dr. Naveen Kabra to start his talk. So please.
Thank you for that introduction. Before I start, how much time should we allocate for the talk versus
Sir,
Q&A?
Sir, 1.5
so
hours.
1.5 hours.
12:45 up to 12:45.
Okay. All right. So what I'll do is I'll do about 1 hour of the talk, and then rest we can have for Q&A. If
Yeah,
okay.
sure, sir.
Right. So that is my screen. All right. Okay. So I am going to talk about which programming language you should learn. Normally, I try to make this an interactive talk. So what I'm going to ask you right now, all the participants, is on chat, if you can send me which is the most important programming language you should learn according to you, and then I in my talk I will based upon that I will adjust my talk accordingly, right? So on the okay, I see a bunch of people saying Python, C++, and Java, Java, more Python, okay, C, Java, okay, VB.NET, that is interesting, something different. Okay, Python is the best. Okay, so Ruby, all right. So other than C, Python, Java, I think if somebody has an answer other than one of those three, please mention those. Okay, MATLAB, ASP.NET, MATLAB. Okay, MATLAB is an interest. MATLAB and Julia are interesting. All right. R, JavaScript. Okay, after a long time somebody said JavaScript, so that's also interesting. All right, let's pause here. All right, C Sharp is there. So yeah, I mean, this is pretty much what typically the answers I get. One very important programming language nobody mentioned, Perl. Yes, one very important one nobody mentioned. In fact, this is the language which is probably #1 in the world, and it is not C, Python, or Java. So does anybody know which language I'm talking about? C++? No, actually, unfortunately, C++ is not one of the top languages. I mean, its importance is reducing. Fortran is also very important, but it's still fairly old and used only in scientific computing. Somebody said learn logic first. That is important, but that's not the, I mean, I'm looking for specifically a programming language. Lisp, yes, Lisp is a great language to learn. I'll talk about that. COBOL is, I mean, it is used in a very small number of cases, and no point in new people learning COBOL. PHP importance is reducing. Okay, let me stop here. Let me give the answer, which is Golang. Also, it is still too small. I mean, it's an important language, but it's not yet up there. C# is also not yet up there. Kotlin is another important language. I'll come to that. The one that all of you forgot about, and which all of you are going to have to learn properly, is, and it's a real programming language, is SQL. Okay, so SQL, and the other important one, which is sort of, it is a language, depending on how you define it, is HTML and CSS. Okay, So, I mean, HTML and CSS is okay. I mean, everybody sort of knows some of it, and when needed, you learn it quickly. SQL is the important one because it is very important. Knowing advanced SQL makes a huge difference in your professional career, and yet it is one of those languages that is not really taught very well in colleges, nor is it taken very seriously by students. Okay, but in any case, my question was a trick question. Okay, there is no such thing as the best programming language to learn. All right, and that is going to be part of the main part of my talk, which is that there is no such thing as the best programming language. What is there is that different situations require you to use different languages. So instead of trying to figure out which language has the most scope or which language is the best one to learn, what you have to figure out is what are the different strengths and weaknesses of the different languages, and what are the situations under which one language will score over another language. And then the third thing you have to figure out is that where in this whole space, where do you want to be? And depending on that, you should learn a few languages. One language is no longer enough these days. 3, 4 is the minimum. And the other important part is that you have to keep learning new languages. So we will come to all of that. Uh, so, I mean, like most of the languages you mentioned, I have also listed. Those are the important ones, but we are not going to try to figure out which is the best. What we are going to try to figure out is which one is I mean, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the different languages? Okay, just one quick question. Can you see the whole slide, or is it blocked by the chat window?
No, we can see.
We can see the whole slide, right? Okay, all right. So basically, let us look at this example. Let's use this as a motivating example to find out the difference between the different programming languages, right? So here is a C program. What you can see, hold on, why can't I? Yeah, okay. So here at the top, what you can see is that we are declaring variables. A file is being declared and some character buffers. And then here we read one line of the file, look at the length of that file, and then compute the longest length, I mean, line with the longest length, right? And finally, at the bottom, we are going to print it. Okay, so this is what we are going to do. Where is this? Okay, now let us look at the same program, but in Python. That's it. That entire program got replaced by
Single line.
one line, right? Everything that was happening in those 16 lines is happening here, right? So now, which is a better program? Again, give me answers on chat. Is the Python program better or the C program better? Okay, most of you are answering Python except one or two who would say Python. Okay, Anurag, the question isn't which language is better. The question is of these two programs, which one is better, right? So I think someone said productivity wise Python. So that is really, again, it was the same trick, right? Like Dr. Vasima pointed out, it depends on which parameter. It depends on best in what sense, right? So this is the important thing I want you to realize, that there is no best. There is always a in what situation. Anywhere, whenever somebody asks best, the follow-up question should be in what situation, right? There are certain situations in which this Python is much better, like someone pointed out. for productivity, right? Whereas for speed, for memory management and things like that, the C program is better. And that's what we are going to try to find out. Okay. And how do you decide, right? So first of all, let us try to understand what are the important differences in modern programming languages, right? So I mean, just think about the different languages that have been mentioned so far, right? So there is C, there is Java, there is Python. Let's right now just think of these three important ones. And what are the big important differences in features between these languages? Can you just say that on chat? Anyone? Okay, C++ has concepts like OOP. So one is style of programming, object-oriented versus procedural, and there is also functional programming. That is one major difference. Somebody else, platform independence or not platform independence, that is correct. Dynamically typed or not dynamically typed. So secure, which one is more secure? So that is also a good one. Yeah, syntax, style, easiness, user friendliness, that is correct. All right, so ease of syntax and all that goes to productivity of the programmer. Operator overloading is not there in all three languages. Actually, Python does have operator overloading, but yeah, operator overloading is one of the differences. Compiled versus interpreted, yes, that is a big important one. Platform independence, yes. Okay, so let me show you a few more that you've missed. Okay, so let's see what we have. Garbage collection, right? Java has garbage collection, Python has garbage collection, C doesn't have garbage collection. And this makes a huge difference in how you have to program, right? Because all of you must have programmed in C, you must have seen the problems that you have to do a malloc, you have to do free, and all the issues of memory leaks or wild pointers and segmentation violations, which are very rare in Java, or if you are using Python or one of the other languages, right? The other, what somebody mentioned already, right? Dynamic typing versus static typing. So in the example we saw C versus Python, half the program in C was type declarations, whereas Python program had no type declarations at all. And we have to understand what is the difference between those two. Now, one of the things I want you to realize is that for each one of these things, right? I guess one question, let us just have this question right away before going, right? Garbage collection, is a language with garbage collection better or without garbage collection? Which is better, with or without? Don't raise your hand, just type it in chat. Okay, with garbage collection is better. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, again, see, all of you are falling for the same trap again and again and again, right? Always the answer is depends. You should have a follow-up question, depends on the situation, correct? So all of them, I mean, everything about my talk is going to be depends on the situation. So there is no concept of this is better or that, right? What you have to understand is what is the situation in which one is better and what is the situation in which the other is better. So each of the features I am going to list out just now here, which different programming languages use or don't use. Each one has some advantages and some disadvantages. And what you have to understand isn't which is better. What you have to understand is which gives you what advantages and what are the disadvantages, right? So we will come to that. What are the disadvantages of garbage collection? We will come to that. I will talk about it a little later, right? Same thing with type system. Python doesn't have types that you declare. That has some advantages, some disadvantages. Similarly, availability, some people mentioned it a little bit, as in, is this language available in the situation that you are thinking about, right? I mean, do you want to do kernel programming, or do you want to write a front end which is going to be used in a web browser, and so on, right? So for all of that, availability is important. You have to know whether the language is available on that situation. A few people also mentioned, this language is good for doing this kind of a thing, and that depends on libraries. Does the language have very strong libraries to do certain things? So somebody mentioned in the comments that if you want to do machine learning, then this language is good. Why is that? That is because it has great libraries for doing machine learning, right? Purva, don't raise your hand. If you have a question, just type it in the chat and I will handle it, okay? Similarly, if you say that I want to do data analytics, right, or data science, then again, certain programming languages have very good libraries for it. They have good communities for it, whereas others aren't that good, right? So depending on what you want to do, you have to check which programming language has good libraries and communities for that. And of course, whether it is procedural or object oriented or functional, I will not touch upon this part too much because this part is taught pretty well in colleges. So we will not get into that in much detail, but you should be aware that which one is which. Okay, so what are the trade-offs, right? Ultimately, I mean, the features of the language are there, and advantages and disadvantages, but finally, in terms of the final output, what difference do any of these make, right? The difference is, the first one is this: program efficiency versus programmer efficiency. That is the first one, which is that are you in a situation where you want the final program to run very fast, or do you want the programmer to write the program very fast, right? And usually these are opposite of each other. In Python, you will be able to write the program very quickly, right? Maybe 10 times faster than writing the same program in C, but the actual program will run 10 times slower than the same program in C, right? So that is efficiency. Similarly, the same thing. So programmer efficiency also trades off against the speed of the program, but it also trades off against the stability of the code. And by stability of the code, I mean things like crashing at runtime, having bugs, and so on, right? So that's a slightly different trade-off, and we will look at both. And third one is difference between, I mean, do you need whatever program you're writing, can you just write a fresh program, or do you need to be backward compatible with programs that were written 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? So this is the kind of thing that is a huge difference between, say, Java and C++. We will talk a little bit about that. But ultimately, everything that you do boils down to one of these things, right? I mean, does this improve programmer efficiency, or does this make the program faster? Does this improve the stability of the code, or does it reduce the stability? And does this have to be compatible with old code, right? So usually one of these three things will answer the question of what do you want to do. A number of people are bringing up issues about security. I will talk a little bit about security, not a whole lot though, but we'll come to that. Okay. So I mean, the short answer is that except for C and C++, which are a little low on security, most other modern programming languages are similar to each other as far as security is concerned. So I mean, don't need to worry too much about that. I mean, if you're choosing C or C++, you are giving up on security. What you're getting in return is very high speed and very I mean, control over the memory, and you're able to do low level things. And as is always true, that if you want to do low level things, you are going to have to give up on security, right? So that's why you choose C, C++ and give up on security. Most other programming languages are a little higher level, and security is not an issue. Okay. All right. So let us look at the difference between garbage collection versus no garbage collection, right? What are the, I guess somebody wanted to know, right? I know all of you thought that having garbage collection is a good thing. So what is the situation in which you don't want garbage collection? So first of all, these are the disadvantages of not having garbage collection, as in you have to write much more code because you're now writing the malloc and the free and all of that yourself. Because of that, programs are buggy. You have to forget, memory leaks, wild pointers, and so on. The main thing is that a program written in C, where you are controlling the memory allocation yourself, is far more efficient, both in terms of speed as well as in terms of how much system resources are consumed. Why is that? Because in Java, let us say, right, the compiler and the virtual machine, they have to automatically decide what to when to free which pointers and so on, right? And for that, they have to run a fairly complicated algorithm called a garbage collection algorithm, which needs to keep track of all the millions of objects in your program and try to automatically figure out which ones you are not going to use again. Okay, and that's not easy to do. Whereas you as a programmer, you already know which object is going to be needed later and which object is not going to be needed, so you can free the object at exactly the right time, right? So that is far more efficient. Another big disadvantage of code with garbage collection is that depending on which algorithm you are using, usually one of the things that garbage collection requires is that you have to pause the entire program while the garbage collector runs. And if it so happens that you have collected a whole lot of memory and now you need to do garbage collection, it can result in a half a second or 1 second pause in the entire program. And that might be okay in some situations, but in many situations that is not okay, right? If you're playing a game and suddenly in the middle of the game, the whole game pauses for half a second, that is going to be a pretty bad experience, right? So that is why typically games will not be written in Java or a language with garbage collection. They are usually written in C or C++ or one of the one of the other languages which doesn't have garbage collection. That's because this kind of a freeze is not acceptable in games and a bunch of other situations. Which languages have garbage collection? Pretty much most of the modern languages, right? Java, Python, everything have garbage collections. The languages which don't have garbage collection are mostly these four: C, C++, Objective-C, Rust, and that's pretty much it, I think, right? Maybe one or two others, but otherwise most modern languages have garbage collection. So remember that if you need to have very efficient use of memory, or you can't afford to have random freezes of half a second in the middle of your program, then you have to be using one of these languages. Okay. All right. The other difference, right? Let's look at the second difference between major programming languages. So static versus dynamic typing. And this is, let's just look at the difference. So here is a program in which I have written a function called append, which takes a string and then returns a new string by appending hello to the input string, right? Now in this program, if I try to add one to it, right? It's a string and I'm trying to add a number. Now this is an error. Okay, I mean, let's assume that we are not using Java or JavaScript. So this is an error. Now the thing is that in a programming language that is statically typed, right, like Java or C, at compile time, the compiler knows that this is an error and it will immediately flag it. It won't let you compile the program until you fix it, right? Because you have made a mistake and the mistake got fixed at the time of compilation itself. Whereas if you are writing it in Python, okay, now the compiler cannot know. There is, I mean, you know, at when you write the program, you don't really, you can't tell that this is a problem. Okay, so what happens is that you start running the program, and then at runtime, depending on what happened, it'll give an error. So this is the big difference. Okay, whether you got the error at compile time versus you got the error at runtime. Why is this a big difference? How does it matter? Can someone tell me? I mean, why is it a big deal that finding an error at compile time is better than finding an error at runtime? Someone? Okay, let me give the answer, right? Finding the error at compile time means that the developer, the person who wrote the software, finds the error, right? If you find the error at runtime, very likely that it is going to be found by the customer. Okay, and the second thing is a very bad thing to happen, right? If your software which contains bugs is going to be I mean, the bugs are seen by the customer, then that's a pretty bad thing, right? You want the bugs to be found before you ship the software to the customer. And that is why static typing has the advantage that you find bugs much earlier. The disadvantage, of course, is that you have to write much more code. Okay, I'll give one more example of static versus dynamic type, right? Just keep this in mind. As in, if I have string X and string Y, uh, actually, no, let's skip this, sorry. There is one more type of typing, okay, which will become interesting later on. And that is something called duck typing. Okay, now imagine you are trying to write a function to find the max of an array. Okay, now this is standard C code to find the max. You take an array, you know the length, you write a for loop, and inside the loop, each element is compared to the current max, and if that is more, then you update the current max and return the current max, right? Simple, fairly simple standard thing. On this side, same thing is happening. You have an array A. For each element in the array, you compare with current and you update the current, right? There's a huge difference between these two programs, and that is that the left hand side program works only on integers. Right now, uh, if I want a max of an array of strings, the right hand side program continues to work, whereas the left hand side will not. If I want an max of an array of floating point numbers, the right hand side program will continue to work, whereas the left hand side doesn't. So on the left hand side, where I have static typing, right, I need to write three different functions for three different types of max, whereas on the right hand side, I write only one function. Now, if you have learned about generics in Java, then you can see that even in static typing, they're trying to figure out ways where you can get the power of the right hand side while still maintaining static types. But that is makes things a little more complicated. Okay, so just keep this in mind. We will come back to this a little later. In the meantime, there is a question I have, which is that earlier I said that in case of static typing, the errors will be found at compile time, whereas in case of dynamic typing, the errors will be found at the customer. So the question was that won't we be doing unit testing so that the bugs will be found? The answer is yes and no. As in, see, unit testing can never find all the bugs because you would have to write a very large number of unit tests for that. And that is human effort, right? So writing unit tests is human effort, whereas finding the bugs through the compiler and the type system, you get it for essentially free because the compiler does it automatically. And the second thing is, yeah, sure. I mean, that is good. You do unit testing and you will find more bugs at compile time. More bugs before you send it to the customer, but it increases your effort because now you have to write unit tests. So in a statically typed program, you will have to write fewer unit tests, whereas in a dynamically typed program, you will have to write many more unit tests, right? So your effort of writing the program is less, but your effort of writing the unit tests increases. So you have to be aware of these disadvantages. Okay. All right. So coming back to the differences between static typing and dynamic typing. In static typing, the disadvantages are that you have to write more code and reuse is difficult. As we saw in the case of our max function, reusing it was painful. Plus compiled here can be an advantage and a disadvantage, right? Compiled as a disadvantage is because if you write a program, right? Now, before you can try it, before you can test it, anytime you make a change, you have to compile the whole thing, okay? And for small programs like the ones you write in college, it doesn't make a big difference because you just click compile and quarter of a second later it is done. But in real life, in companies, the programs are so large that compilation itself can take 5 to 10 minutes, or if you touch a header file, then it can even take half an hour, and that is a huge problem for productivity, right? Whereas with a interpreted programming language or dynamically compiled programming language, that is much less of a problem. So this reduction in productivity of the programmer because of this extra step is a problem. Of course, there are, I already talked about the fact that there are fewer bugs in the program finally. Also, usually the program that is generated by the compiler in case of a statically typed language is more efficient. That is because at compile time, it knows the exact type of each object. And when you are calling a function or a method, it knows which method to call. Whereas in case of a dynamically typed, all those decisions have to be taken at runtime. So every statement in your code is going to be preceded by a whole bunch of checks as to what is the type of this, then what is the method I want to call on this, and if I'm going to do a plus, then which plus am I using? Am I using the integer plus or the floating point plus or the string plus, and so on, right? So every statement gets converted into 5 to 10 statements in case of a dynamically typed program, whereas in case of a statically typed program, one statement becomes one machine instruction, right? So it is far more efficient. Which modern languages are statically typed? So these are the ones you are most familiar with, right? C, C++, C# is also statically typed. So is Java. There is Swift, Go, right? All of this. And of course, there I should also mention, well, Kotlin, we will come to, it's a different beast. JavaScript, PHP, Python, Ruby, Perl, these are all languages with dynamic types. Okay, so always remember that usually dynamic type, so on this side you will have code with much less code. You will be able to write programs much faster, but these programs will not be very efficient and they will have more runtime errors. So remember when I talked about, so there is developer productivity versus speed of the program, also stability of statically typed languages is less, whereas dynamically typed programming language have less stability. Okay. Now, I talked about duck typing. Okay, duck typing really means that you don't have to declare the type. In fact, type isn't important, right? So if you look at this max, now what it is saying is that this function max takes a collection of things, and then what you do is the only two things that are needed. Let's say the contents of the collection is of some type T, right? So the only thing that matters is that you should be able to compare two different T instances using greater than. Okay, all is needed is that it should support the greater than operator. So this particular program, this function, will work for any array or any collection of types which support the greater than operator, right? So you don't have to declare any types, you don't have to do anything at runtime. Whenever whatever collection is passed to it, the compiler checks, interpreter checks whether the type has a greater than defined on it. If yes, then this function is going to work, right? So this is called duck typing, because the principle being used is that if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it is a duck. So same thing with the type. If it gives greater than, then I can do a max on it. I don't need to know the type. All right. So this is one of the there are four different important type systems. One was static types, one was dynamic types, this is duck typing, and the fourth one I will come to. Okay. Now this is the fourth one, right? So the idea is type inference, and the thing is that in the old days, say with early versions of Java and C and C++ and all of that, you had to pretty much specify the type of each and every variable, each and every parameter, each and every return value of a function. Okay, but it turns out that even in a statically typed system, this is not really required. Okay, you can automatically figure out, the compiler can automatically figure out the types at compile time. So let's look at an example here, right? Let's say I have written a method called increment x. Okay, now we don't know the type of x. Now we have declared a variable called res, and we don't know the type of this res either. But let's look at this next line, right? What I did was res is equal to x plus hello. Okay, now the thing is that in this particular language, let us say, right, I'm doing x plus hello, so I'm adding the string hello to x. So what is the type of x, right? This should tell you, let's say we are not using Java where anything can be added to a string, but let's say you're using some other programming language, right, where you can't add an integer and a string. Then this tells me that x has to be a string. Now if I take a x plus hello, the result will also be a string. So again, this tells me that res also has to be a string. So just by looking at this code, the compiler can figure out that x is a string, res is a string, and let's look at the next line here, right? I am trying to do res plus 1.0. Okay, now I have already figured out that res is a string, and I'm trying to add a number here. So obviously that's an error. And the important point to note is that because the compiler automatically figured out the types, it can figure out that this is a error at compile time. Okay, so even though you didn't mention the types of any of the variables or the function return here, still the compiler was able to figure out the types. Okay, so this is called type inferencing, and this is extremely important There is a little bit of type inferencing in Java, but not a whole lot. I mean, this is a very recent thing, right? So modern programming languages like Swift and Kotlin, they do a lot of type inferencing. And what type inferencing allows you to do is that you get all the advantages of static typing systems without most of the disadvantages, right? Because one of the big disadvantages of a statically typed language like C was that you had to define, half the program was defining the types. But with type inferencing, you don't have to define the types, but still the compiler automatically figures it out. So you get all the advantages, right? So the future is going to be more and more type inferencing systems. Okay, so type inferencing systems will ultimately are going to win over systems which don't have strong type inferencing. All the people raising hands, please just type your question in the chat window. I am looking at the chat window. All right. So I'm going to skip this. Okay. So all right. So type inferencing, what are good examples of modern programming languages that use type inferencing? So Kotlin, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Kotlin. It's a new but important programming language. There are Haskell and Scala also. Those are functional programming languages. All of these have very strong type inferencing systems. Swift, which is the programming language that is used for iPhone and iOS applications, right? That also has type inferencing, right? For slowly, some type inferencing is being added to other languages, right? So C++ has type inferencing from C++ 11 onwards. Very likely that you have been taught C++ 99, which is a little out of date. So all the new features on C++ 11 or C++ 14 or C++ 17, you haven't been taught. There's a whole lot of cool features there. In Java 8, Java 9 has a bunch of type inferencing features, but still, I mean, type inferencing is there for variable declarations and a few other things, but it is still required. I mean, types have to be defined for function parameters and return values and so on. So it's not all the way there. Okay, but over time it's going to be added because type inferencing clearly is better than pure statically typed or pure dynamically typed. Okay, all right. Now let's move on to availability. Okay, but before that, any questions about garbage collection or type systems so far? Okay, at this point, I guess if you want to ask a question, but you don't want to type it, just raise your hand and we can. All right, I assume no questions, so let us move on. Let's talk about availability. Okay, so the first thing, right? If you want to do interactivity in the browser, right? Basically, you're trying to create a software program for which you want to do, I mean, the front end is through a web browser, right? So pretty much all the interaction that is going to come, I mean, the entire front end has to be written in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, there is just no choice. There is no other programming language that really works reasonably well in the browser. Okay, so I mean, right now Kotlin is one language where they are trying to set it up so that Kotlin can compile to JavaScript and JavaScript will run in the browser so that you can write all your front-end code in Kotlin. But that is still too new, at least for a couple of years. That is not a very, which means that if your program has a front end that is web-based, you have no choice. You have to do it in JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Similarly, if you are doing systems level programming, mainly if you are doing kernel programming of some sort or you're writing a device driver of some sort, then no choice. Okay, I mean, all the major operating systems of the world today are written in C, which means that kernel programming, you don't have a choice. It has to be in C. There is no alternative. Okay. iPhone apps, if you want to write an iPhone app, pretty much you have to write it in Objective-C or Swift. Those are the only two languages that Apple supports. I mean, one of the things you can do is that you can write a program in JavaScript and HTML, CSS. Basically, it will be like a web-based program, and then you just open a little web view in the on your phone, and then run that your JavaScript, HTML, CSS program in there, right? But that kind of a program, that kind of an app, is never really as good as a native app, right? So in most cases, the world, I mean, if you want to write iPhone apps, you have to write it in Swift or Objective-C. And similarly, if you want to write an Android app, you have to write it in Java or Kotlin, right? There is really no choice there. Okay. Someone has asked a question, is there scope in iPhone apps? So this is a very funny thing, right? Because people keep asking about scope. And the problem is that if anything I am talking about, and you have heard of it, that means that it is important enough that it has scope, right? I mean, somebody earlier in the talk, somebody mentioned COBOL, somebody mentioned Fortran. And yes, COBOL and Fortran also, although they are so old and completely out of date, but they still have scope. Just recently, there was news that during the pandemic and the lockdown in the US, the demand for COBOL programmers had gone up. Even today, the number of COBOL programmers is very low, but the ones who are there, their salaries are very high, right? So everything has scope. Scope is not a function of the programming language. Scope is a function of the person, right? If you do anything well, there is always scope. You become one of the best people in that area, there is always scope. So you shouldn't worry about that. What you should focus on is, do you like doing it and are you good at doing it? Okay. Similarly, so I told you cross-platform apps means you want the same program to work on Android or iPhone or on the web. Then you have to write it in JavaScript, HTML, CSS. But the thing is that it is rare. I mean, there's only a few apps which work very well like this. More and more, what companies are doing is that if you want something to be available on multiple platforms, you write a different app for each platform. Okay. Let me see. I think I'm missing. Give me a minute. The text is scrolling off the screen, so I'll try to get the rest of it out. Okay, forget it. So there are a couple of other areas in terms of availability, right? One is that if you are writing programs which are going to be ultimately sold to large companies, right? I mean, if you're working, basically you're writing enterprise software. So one of the things that large companies like is that they want stability over everything else. They want tried and tested above everything else. So the combination of tried and tested and stability is Java, right? So there is a very, very high chance that if you end up working for a company that sells software to other large companies, then it is going to be in Java. Or if it is a Microsoft based software, then it is going to be in C#, right? .NET and C#. So pretty much depending on which company you are working for and who are they selling to, it is very likely that the choice will be between Java and C#. And usually in India, most of the most of the jobs are in companies that are building enterprise software. So very likely that there the language is going to be Java or C Sharp. However, if it's a smaller company, mid-sized startup, etc., right, then it is not so much of a concern, and then you end up getting to use a lot of the other languages, right? So anyway, the big point to be made here is the fact that you can't choose a programming language purely based on the merits of the programming language. You also have to look at the situation and what are you writing it the program for, and then depending on that, your choices might be limited. Okay. Okay. So the other thing I had mentioned was libraries versus community versus installed base. Okay. So for example, if you want to do systems programming, okay, now the thing is that when you are writing a program, there is no point in reinventing the wheel. There is no point in doing something that hundreds of other people have done. And most of the time you will realize that when you want to do something, 80% of it, 80-90% of it is something common which lots of people would have to do, and 10% is unique to your situation. Let me give an example, right? If you come up with an idea of creating a what do you call it, let's say a social network for the tailors in Bihar, okay, that's a very unique situation. Okay, but the point is that you want a probably you want an app, you want a website, let's just say it's a web based, you want a website. So the thing is, you will need to have a login page, you'll need to have a forgot password page. Once you log in, you will need to have a profile page where you have to update the name and address and photo and things like that, right? Now all of these are things that pretty much any website in the world needs, right? And there is no point in you trying to reinvent that. So that part you should just directly get from a library or a framework somewhere. And then the things which are unique to your situation, tailoring, Bihar, maybe something to do with Hindi language, those things you need to customize, right? Which means that 80-90% should be from libraries. And the question is that for the kind of thing you want to do, is it available in the programming language easily or not? And for that we come to this, which is that if you are doing any systems programming, then the biggest and best libraries for system programming are available in C or Go language or Python and Perl. Out of this, Perl is on the way out. Its popularity has been reducing for the last 15 years. So it is pretty much now dying. So you should focus on one of these, right? C is the granddaddy of systems programming. Everything is in C. And like I said, if it is lowest levels of the system, that is kernel and device drivers, then there is no choice other than C. But one level above that is Go. It is new, it is supported by Google, and the language was written by the inventors of the C programming language. So whatever mistakes they made in C, they have learned from those and they have created Go. So for systems programming, Go is an extremely popular language. And if you want to do quick, fast prototyping and fast things you want to get done in C, then in systems, then Python is a good language, especially if performance is not that important, whereas doing something quickly is more important. Okay. Next is, like I already said, if you want to do something for large companies, then Java and C# will have the most libraries. So, this includes weird things like, you want to write a software, but and login and password thing. Instead, it should automatically be able to talk to the company's HR system and pick up the usernames from there, and it should use that for authentication, or it will use something called LDAP for authentication. And not just that, but it should be able to talk to the Oracle system of the company, and all kinds of requirements like this are there. And the libraries to do all of this easily are best available in Java and C#. The reason I have written Kotlin in brackets is because Kotlin is a unique and interesting language. It is a new language. It is a language with type inferencing, static typing. It's a modern language, so it is very concise. It is almost like Python in terms of being able to write code quickly, but it is backward compatible with Java in the sense that you can import Java libraries in Kotlin, and you can just directly call them as if they are Kotlin functions and Kotlin methods. Okay, so because of that, anywhere that you can use Java, you can also use Kotlin. Okay, so that's why wherever I have mentioned Java, I have mentioned Kotlin in brackets. Okay, so okay, somebody has asked the question, can MicroPython be the new paradigm for device drivers processing device? No, not really. I mean, anybody who's doing device drivers needs a lot of low level control, and performance is very important. So things like MicroPython are good for quick development and prototyping, but they're not really good for serious things. Another question I am seeing here is, let's see, what is the question?
Sir, one question I would like to ask. Dr. Raj Kamal is there. He is the former Vice Chancellor of Devi Ahilya University.
Yeah.
And you might be knowing him. He is the author of almost 14 to 15 books with Tata McGraw-Hill.
Okay, great.
Yeah, he just want to ask, what is the scope of Node.js?
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, you and I have heard of Node.js, which means there is scope, right? I mean, there is always scope to use it, right? But in terms of trends or increasing or decreasing importance, I can say that basically what is happening with Node.js is that from this talk, you would have realized that pretty much everybody has to learn JavaScript, because no matter what program you write your backend in, the front end has to be in JavaScript, right? So based on that, what people started thinking was that why can't we just learn one language? So I learned JavaScript for the front end, and let me try to use JavaScript for the backend also, right? And that pretty much JavaScript with libraries for doing backend kind of things is called Node.js. And the importance of Node.js is increasing, but all these advantages and disadvantages that we have talked about, all of that still exists, right? So in the backend, for certain kinds of situations, Node.js is good because it's a high level programming language like JavaScript, but for certain things still Java is preferred. So if you're writing large company software, Java is better. If you want I mean, we'll see some advantages of Python a little later. So that their Python scores over Node.js. So in general, for the backend stuff, one huge advantage Node.js has over others is that all the JavaScript programmers in the world are already familiar with JavaScript, so they don't have to learn one more language for the backend. So in that sense, it has increasing importance. Okay. Somebody asked that do bank companies still use COBOL for faster processing? No, that's not the real reason for using COBOL. Yes, I mean, COBOL is pretty fast. It was a very, in some sense, low-level language. But the real reason, but modern languages are also pretty fast. The real reason for using COBOL is because many of these systems were literally written 40, 50 years ago. They are rock solid. They are very stable. And there is just I mean, there was no need to upgrade them, because see, remember that anytime you do an upgrade, that's a lot of effort in writing the new code, and then there is a lot of effort in testing the new code to make sure that you haven't introduced any bugs, and then there is a lot of disruption as you replace the old systems with the new systems, and that's a big effort. So unless there is some serious problem, nobody wants to put in effort like that. And most of the banks, say the railway reservation system in India, a lot of them run on old mainframes, which are running COBOL. So nobody felt the need to upgrade them. And now even if they want to upgrade them, it's a problem because the people who built those systems and who understand all the ins and outs of those systems, most of those people are dead, right? So it is very difficult to upgrade them. So that's why all of those are still around. And every once in a while, some company finally decides that we can't continue using this old system, we need to upgrade. And then you need someone who will write the new program, but also someone who understands the old program. So that is why the old COBOL programmers have a lot of value and very high salaries. Similarly, if you want to basically you want to run make small changes in your program, right? You have to pay one of the old COBOL programmers. So that's why COBOL and COBOL programmers still have value, right? So that also answers the question on why is the demand for COBOL programmer high. I mean, part of the reason it is high is because there aren't enough COBOL programmers around, right? Let's see, what other questions are there? Okay, so I think I don't see any further questions. I will continue with the talk. All right.
So one of the student is raising his hand. Would you like to take the question?
Sarvesh, go ahead with your question.
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
Yeah, go ahead.
सर आई वांटेड टू आस्क कि जैसे अभी मैंने थोड़े टाइम पहले एक आर्टिकल पढ़ा था कि जूलिया, रस्ट और स्काला तीनों
हाँ.
मिलके एक मैथमेटिक्स में, एक स्टैटिस्टिक्स में, एक प्रोग्रामिंग में बहुत अच्छी हैं और वो मशीन लर्निंग को और न्यूरल नेटवर्क को बॉयकॉट वो अच्छे से कर रही है, मतलब बॉयकॉट नहीं कर रही, बहुत अच्छे से कर रही है उनको। और बहुत सारे लोग बोल रहे हैं कि वो लोग इसके बजाय उसमें ज्यादा प्रेफर करेंगे, कंपनी उससे ज्यादा प्रेफर करेंगी।
Yes.
तो अगर हम लॉन्ग टर्म में देखें तो पाइथन उसके लिए ज्यादा अच्छा है मशीन लर्निंग न्यूरल नेटवर्क के लिए, या फिर हमारी जो 3 लैंग्वेजेस हैं वो ज्यादा प्रेफरेबल हैं?
So I will come to that. Okay, so basically it boils down to the question of you know, for say if you want to do analytics, mathematical programming and machine learning, which is a good programming language. So you know, there is Julia, there is MATLAB, R, and there is program. So we will come to that a little bit. Yashvardhan has asked, is Python used for backend programming? So that also we will come to. I mean, one example you're already seeing, which is that for systems, Python is a good language. We'll come to both of these. Okay, so for web, PHP, Ruby, and Python, these three languages have the largest libraries and communities for web-based developments and frameworks and so on. And whenever anything new is developed in this area, usually it comes in one of these languages first and then slowly gets added to the other languages. If you want to do scientific programming, right? So this includes things like, you know, engineering, fluid mechanics, thermodynamics, aircraft control systems, and all those kinds of things. Then Fortran is a great language because earliest programs were all written in Fortran. Lots of libraries there. Slowly, more and more of the scientific community has started doing this in Python. So Python would be the second best language. If you want to do NLP, natural language programming, or statistics or machine learning, right? R is a great language. MATLAB is a great language.
Naveen sir, your voice is not coming. I guess there is some network issues.
And C++ and Java, I have put those in brackets because the way this whole area works and so on. So R and MATLAB, these are languages where you know, you can almost write mathematical equations directly in their in this language, because they don't want to learn a full-fledged programming language like Python. Okay. Whereas this is much easier to learn because the formulas here are closer to what they have learned. So a lot of new stuff, statistical packages, natural language processing algorithms, machine learning algorithms gets developed in R MATLAB first. Okay, but the thing is that if you want to do anything else with it, right, other than statistics, I mean, you have to interface with other systems. After you have to do your calculations, you have to get data from the databases, and you have to do some other processing of the data. After the calculation, you have to put it in some new format and send it to the next system. For doing all those kinds of things, Python is a much better language, right? Because it's a full-fledged programming language, whereas those are not so great at doing non-statistical things, right? So Python, the core statistics is still a little behind R and MATLAB, but it makes up in the other areas. Okay. Now, one problem with Python is that, I mean, Python is slow, right? So what they have done is that for the most important parts, the low level routines needed for doing statistics and matrix multiplication and array manipulation and all of that, they have written those on C and made those available in Python. So most of the time you don't have to, I mean, even though you're writing in Python, you're getting the speed of C. But once in a while, if you're using something that doesn't exist in the C libraries and you wrote it in Python, then that part is slow. Okay. So, and in general, R and MATLAB, they're a little faster than Python, but they are also dynamically typed languages. So they are not as fast as say C++ or Java can be. So, but these are the things, this whole area, statistics, machine learning, natural language processing, the thing is that this area needs a lot of prototyping, lot of exploration, lots of trying different things. And you can't do that with languages like C++ and Java, where it is painful to write new stuff, right? So the way it works is that people will do the exploration in R or MATLAB or Python. And once they have figured out that this is the correct algorithm to use, this is what I want to do, then they will rewrite the whole thing in C++ or Java for maximum speed, right? So that's why I have put C++ and Java in brackets here. Now, in all of this, what someone came up with the thought that why do we need to do this two different times, right? One language, one set of languages for quick exploration and a different set of languages for speed. Why can't we have a language which is built for this, where you can do quick exploration and it is very fast also? So Julia is that language. But the thing is that these are very well established. They have lots of libraries. They have, you know, thing is, for example, I mean, if you start a company and in that you start doing a statistical something package, if you do it in Python,
I think Naveen sir has left by mistake.
He's disconnected now.
Yeah, we can wait for 5 minutes. I think he'll rejoin.
In the meantime, you can request for the feedback submission.
Feedback link has been posted on the chat box. All of you can give the feedback by the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Naveen
he's
sir
back
is
with us. Yeah.
all right, sorry about that. Give me a minute. Can you enable screen sharing for me, please?
Yes, sir. I have made you co-host. Now you can do the screen share.
Okay. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to do this. Where are the last questions? Let me see. Okay, basically Julia, right? Uh, I mean, what I was talking about is that if you come up with a company, now finding Julia programmers will be difficult because Julia is still a new language, whereas finding Python programmers is much easier from the programming community. Or if you want to say you look at R or MATLAB programmers is easy if you go to the maths and statistics community, right? So that is a disadvantage Julia has. I mean, Julia is a great language for doing all of this, but it is relatively new. So it remains to be seen. I mean, on the one hand, these languages, Python, etc., they are catching up, their features are improving, whereas Julia's popularity is increasing. So in 3 years, what will happen, who knows, right? But right now, R, MATLAB, Python are more popular. I don't know whether that will continue to be the case as far as this particular area is concerned. Okay. Coming to the next thing, front end, like I said, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, all the libraries and community related to the front end is in JavaScript. So there is just no choice there.
Sir, please make it full screen.
Unfortunately, there is something that's...
Sir, I think you have shared your whole screen instead of the presentation.
Yeah.
That is the problem.
Okay. Is this better? Yeah. Okay. Okay, mobile apps, right? If you are going to for doing mobile apps, it depends on which mobile app, right? So if you are going to do Android apps, then Java is the one that has the largest community. Kotlin should be in brackets there because it can just pretty much reuse all of Java's community. So if you are in iOS, then Swift and Objective-C. HTML5 and JavaScript areas also have decent communities because there are still some people doing cross-browser, cross-platform apps using just JavaScript and HTML5, right? So this includes things like React and Angular. All right. So this is, I mean, basically what all of this says is that depending on what you want to do, the choices of language might be limited. Now, coming back to some of the questions people asked, right? Now, is Python a backend language? Not really. I mean, you can see that it's there in a lot of these areas, but yeah, front end, see, only JavaScript is a front end language these days, right? So in that sense, pretty much all other languages are backend languages. But other than that, Python is kind of there in pretty much most of these items, but not the first one anywhere. It is like the second best or third best in most of these areas. So yeah, okay. So let's go further. What should you learn, right? So first of all, is that irrespective of what you are going to do and when you are going to do it, C you must learn, because as CSIT background people, you have to know the basics, right? And the basics of everything is C. I mean, all operating systems are written in C. The first compilers of all these programming languages were written in C. For many of the, say, the virtual machines, the best virtual machine of Java is written in C. The Python compiler interpreter is written in C, and so on, right? So C is necessary. Then Java, because it is, I mean, like I said, especially in India, most companies are writing enterprise software, which means most of it is Java. So that is why you have to learn Java. And pretty much all front end is in JavaScript, so you have to learn JavaScript. So these three are the minimum. Then you have to look at your area of interest. What do you want to do? So if you're interested in the web, then Python or Ruby, okay? You will notice that PHP is missing from this list. Okay, there are two reasons for that. One is that PHP was very important, say 10 years ago, even 5-6 years ago, but its importance is reducing. And the reason for that is because PHP is a terrible programming language. Okay, if you learn PHP, you will learn the bad programming habits. Okay, so as far as possible, try to avoid PHP. PHP is terrible. Okay, that's why if you're interested in the web, pick Python or Ruby. 3 years ago, Ruby was ahead of Python as far as web is concerned, but slowly Python is going ahead of Ruby now. If you are interested in data science, then Python or MATLAB, okay, or Julia. I have written Python first here because most of you are from CS IT background. So for you, learning a full-fledged programming language like Python would be better. It will give you the advantages of both being able to do the numerical analysis and statistics using Python libraries, but also doing all the other things that are needed, right? Whereas R and MATLAB are more suited for people who are a little afraid of programming and come from a maths background. Which again, what you will notice from the previous slide and this slide is that if you have broad interest, if you're unclear or unsure what to do, then Python is a good language to learn because it's kind of a jack of all trades. It is not the best language for anything, but it's the second best for everything. So in that sense, Python is good. This last point I want to talk about. Okay, okay. Somebody is asking, what about Node.js, right? Node.js you don't have to learn separately. Okay, Node.js is just JavaScript with a few things added on to be able to do things in the backend, right? So in that sense, Node.js is just like learning an extra library in JavaScript. So Node.js is just JavaScript. That's why I have not listed it separately anywhere. But Node.js is already included in this. Somebody wants to know, is Python good for solving iterative problems like Newton-Raphson and Gauss-Seidel method? Yes and no. Okay. No, in the sense that something like Newton-Raphson or Gauss-Seidel method, right? It tends to be very compute intensive, right? It has to be done fast, otherwise it will take a long time. So in that sense, Python would have been a pretty bad language for doing that. But the thing is that Python already has ready-made libraries written in C, but accessible from Python to be able to do this, right? So examples like NumPy and SciPy are libraries which do all of these. They do it very fast. So you do Python and you will have a ready-made Newton-Raphson method function and you can just use it. So in that sense, Python is a good language for doing that. Okay. What's best for backend? I think, you know, pretty much if you look at what I've been talking about, from that you can figure out, because backend isn't one thing. Backend can be many different things. Is it for a big company? Is it for a small company? Is it for web-based? Is it the backend for app? Mobile app and so on, right? Okay. Somebody wants to know, what happened? Hold on. Please don't type too many blank spaces in your question, because then that scrolls the screen up and I can't see other people's questions. Do you think that doing competitive programming and open source helps in developing skills? Yes. Okay. So be careful about competitive programming, as in there are some skills competitive programming develops, right? It develops skills for efficient use of the right data structures. It develops skills for writing programs very quickly and fast. But what I have seen of most competitive programmers is that they learn a lot of really terrible practices, right? They focus on being able to write code quickly. So they will use one-letter variables and they will use all kinds of macros and hash defines and things like that. They will have like 3 pages full of predefined things and so on, right? That's a terrible way to write programs. In real life, you are never going to be in a situation where you have to write a program in 1 hour, right? In real life, you always have enough time. and readability of the program is far, far, far more important than being able to complete something in a small amount of time. So I would not take competitive programming very, very seriously. Do a little bit of it so that you get a feel for good data structures and fast, efficient algorithms, but not too much. Open source does develop skills of a different type, right? Open source will develop your skills that are beyond just programming. Okay, there are things like you need to document things well. Your software engineering practices will hugely improve because of open source. All the other things that are not taught in school, like appropriate use of Git and version control systems, appropriate use of bug tracking systems, good communication, all of those you will learn if you do open source. How do I start contributing to open source? Do a Google search. There are lots of people who have written articles on how do you get started, right? So question is, what about Flutter for mobile apps development? See, there are lots of little libraries and frameworks. I mean, literally hundreds of them. So I'm not going to cover things at that level of detail. What I would suggest is that think of the general principles that I have talked about today, and then based on that, figure out any specific platform that you are thinking about, framework. So Flutter, which programming language is it written in? What does it focus on? Does it focus on developer speed or the program speed, and things like that, right? So it is impossible for me to cover everything. What I want you to take home is these general principles which you can apply yourself, right? Another question is, for IoT applications, which language is best? C, right? So in IoT, the important thing is that you have very limited memory, you have very limited CPU, and it has to be fast, right? And it has to use less energy. And all of those only come from being able to control things very precisely. And for that, you have to use C and embedded programs. Okay. Some reports claim that Python will be useful for embedded applications. No, not really, right? Python is too large and too slow for embedded. I mean, unless, see, depends on what you call embedded, right? These days, what more and more people are doing is that they put an entire Raspberry Pi into a little system, and then there you can run whatever, because Raspberry Pi is pretty much a full-fledged computer, right? So there you can use Python, but that's usually a shortcut because you want to get something out quickly, and the performance is not that important, or keeping the cost down is not important. That is only useful at a small scale, right? If you want large scale, then it has to be much cheaper than a Raspberry Pi. Then you can't do Python. For AI and ML, I've already covered that, right? Okay. Now, let me talk a little bit about this Lisp and Haskell that I have mentioned, right? These are two languages that I haven't talked about at all, right? So the thing is that, let's see, I have a slide later on about that. I will see that. I'll come to Lisp and Haskell later, but basically, look at this. Okay, so Kotlin is a new language which has been written to get the advantages of modern programming practices, including things like type inferencing. And you want a statically typed language, which is like Python in terms of developer productivity, right? But what they have done, the smart thing, is that it is fully compatible with Java. So any existing Java programs you can use with Kotlin directly. Any existing Java libraries you can use. The other thing is that Android, I mean, Google has made Kotlin fully compatible with Android Studio. So any mobile apps, Android apps also can now be written using Kotlin. This last thing that I talked about, right, that you can compile to a JavaScript browser, that is still experimental. So that is not yet there, but maybe in 1 or 2 years that will happen. But until then, the other three things are fairly important enough, right? So that's why I believe that Kotlin is going to have increasing importance in the next few years. So that would be a great language to learn. Functional programming, okay. So this includes stuff like Haskell that I talked about, another language called Scala, or if you are C#, .NET kind of a person, then Microsoft has the F# programming language, right? In reality, I mean, there is very low chance of getting a job where you have to write functional programming. Okay, there's almost no jobs like that. But the thing is that if you learn functional programming, if you learn one of these languages, it will significantly improve the way you think about programs, your ability to write good quality programs, your ability to think about data structures properly, and also something that is getting more and more importance these days, which is that doing multi-core programming, parallelism, there you need something called non-mutable data structures, and functional programming will help you with that. So basic idea is that even if you never use a functional programming language in your real job, it will make you a better Java programmer or a better Python programmer if you learn this, right? And the same thing is true of Lisp. Okay, Lisp was the second programming language ever designed. Okay, first programming language was Python in around 1957 or so. Lisp was second one in around 1959 or so. And yet, even today, Lisp has more features than most modern programming languages, right? I mean, more and more as modern programming languages add new features, they are slowly evolving towards Lisp. So if you manage to learn Lisp properly, it will make you a better programmer, even though you will never actually get a chance to use Lisp probably in your job, right? So you can either learn Lisp directly, or there is a variation of Lisp called Clojure, which can be used along with Java and on the JVM, right? So one of those you can learn. And yeah, like I said, if other fancy programming languages are, if you are interested in high reliability, right? Like your phone systems, which cannot offer a single second of downtime. They have to be always up, as in saying that your phone is down for 10 minutes. I mean, you can't make incoming or outgoing calls for 10 minutes would be unacceptable, right? So there you use a programming language called Erlang, which has really interesting features. If you want to do functional programming in the JVM, learn Scala. If you want to do Lisp in JVM, learn Clojure. If you want to do functional programming in .NET, learn F#. And like what I started with, that SQL is very important and you're not paying attention to it, right? So learn SQL properly. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to stop here. I'll take questions at this point if anybody has. I think we have around 7-8 minutes for questions.
Yeah, we are having around 7-8 minutes for question. Anybody is having any question, please raise your hand.
I think all the questions have been answered during the lecture only.
Okay, good.
So nobody is asking new question.
No, sir. Some students are raising their hands. I guess Ali Rizvi.
Can mute him.
Okay. I think
Because we
there
are
is
having only 6 to 7 minutes left now.
Yeah. So we are having a question on the chat box, which is the best program for both Android and app development.
Well, I mean, I think I already answered this, right? If you want to do Android and app development, either you have no choice, Java or Kotlin. Those are the only two choices. Ali wants to know, I have heard that mastering data structures and algorithms is more important than learning programming languages. Okay, this is a great question. Let me talk about this a little bit, right? The thing is that if you, this is true in general, I mean, knowing the basic principles of programming languages. So one is data structures and algorithms, knowing when to use the right data structure at the right time, knowing which algorithm to use. But even more than that, right, knowing the principles of modularity, writing good code, breaking up your program into the right functions or classes, writing code that is easy to understand, easy to read. All these are basic programming principles, and those are more important than the specific programming language that you learn, right? That is one. Second thing is that I mean, basically, whichever language you do, make sure that you understand the basics well and you do those well, because in jobs and interviews and things like that, whichever language you have learned, have you done it well? That is more important than which language you have learned. Second thing is that once you have learned the basic principles and one programming language, then learning a new language is very easy. Okay, learning the third, fourth, fifth languages will take less and less effort, whereas the syntax of one language to other isn't that useful. But the basic principles of data structures and algorithms and modular code and so on, those are useful always, right? You learn them now and 30 years later, they will still be useful. Whereas the programming languages will guaranteed to be different. What else is there?
Okay, so I think we are done with the questions.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. I genuinely enjoyed the session, and I think all other participants must have enjoyed as well. It was a very, very informative session, and we all have enjoyed it. And Dr. Shukla also wanted to thank you, so I request him to do that.
Thank you, Naveen sir. In fact, I don't know whether you remember or not, but almost 4 or 5 years back, I approached you for the same talk, and due to non-availability of the flight from Pune to Bhopal, it could not happen.
Right.
So this is the benefit of the lockdown, sir.
Yes.
So virtually we have learned a lot from you today. This was an excellent talk, and without wasting much time, I should request you one more time spare some time in the month of July also for the next talk on whether we should go for MS, MBA or career.
Yeah.
Anytime in the month of July, sir.
We'll see.
So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this is the certificate of appreciation from our group. And it was very, very, very useful talk, sir. Yeah. Although I feel that some 30 minutes more or were required for this talk. But anyway, in the limited time, whatever can be done, it has been done. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone, for listening to him. Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Please wait for 3-4 days for the certificates, because almost 300-400 certificates are to be issued. So I request all the participants to please bear with us for 3-4 days.
Okay, so I'm ending the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Yes.